Yo, what's good, Relocation Football League fans? It's your boy Smitty. Hold up, let me go ahead and get a little dark on this side. Need to get a little light. Alright, who we got here so far? We got Peyton Van Vackeren. CP, what's going on? Got 8 others in here, man. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button before we hop in this podcast. Of course, podcast shouldn't take too long. I'm out here, just on. Okay, music's done. Just out here on the podcast, rocking a casual 2002 oversized hoodie or t-shirt. I don't even know where the hoodie came from, but at the end of the day, your boy is ready to talk about this week and ready to hand out some bells. I think you guys know which teams are going to be getting them, but at the end of the day, it's time for the RFL podcast, man. And the college series has been just absolutely wild. Of course, you could see from the thumbnail that I had here, and it looks like we might have some new champions this year. We're going to get into that after seeing what happened with Ohio State. Penn State looking really good right now. We're going to get into all of that. Of course, before we do, let's go ahead and start talking about the rest of the games. So let's go to game number 1 that sparked off week 5. Okay, here we go. Gotta bring them all up here. See a hoodie without a hood. I know, right? Got a hoodless hoodie. But all right, game number 1. This should be the first bell. Even though we kind of knew this was going to happen, I'm gonna bell them anyway because Auburn got absolutely bodied. Straight casket Undertaker work. Georgia bounced back with a vengeance. I mean, these guys are just absolutely dominant. And oh boy, here, Stephen Ferguson ended up taking home Defensive Player of the Week in the SEC. He had 2 defensive touchdowns within this game. Dude was just an absolute monster. But just even with those 2 touchdowns, the team as a whole still scored 35 more points. That's how crazy they went on Auburn. Young, he won SEC Offensive Player of the Week, and I don't have the graphic for this, but of course the list of the players who have been put in charge, Dorian Chavis he's been doing a good job so far. Like the guys he's been coming up with makes sense. And for the SEC Offensive Player and Defensive Player of the Week, both from Georgia, obviously so with the game with this kind of outcome, 49-3. We saw wasn't a lot of carries that much for Mike Spears, but really didn't have opportunity to really do that too much as the score just continued to grow, and he couldn't be as productive as they wanted him to be on the ground. Don Beck, of course, threw a few interceptions, no touchdowns. It was a tough day for him, and their best wide receiver was their tight end in terms of yards, had 6 receptions for 48 yards. Talking about Georgia, though, I mean, they were just firing on all cylinders. This is the way you wanted to see them come back after their upsetting loss to LSU. Then they came off that bye week and was like, hey, to sit and think about that game for 2 weeks, we had to go ahead and put Auburn in a casket. Lost an SEC game, won an SEC game, and now look at them with a 46-point victory over Auburn. And I knew they were going to do good, but I'm going to be honest. I didn't think they were going to do that good in this game. That was an excellent game there by UGA. So not really too much to talk about there because it was just pure domination all the way through. All right, moving on. TCU versus Oklahoma. I know this game was later. This was supposed to be on Friday. It ended up getting pushed back to Sunday. Yep, the day before, along with the Oregon game. And it was a great game. It was very competitive. TCU at the end of the day found a way to get it done. And I kind of alluded to this. You can't sleep on TCU this year. TCU, I know they don't have Amari Harris no more. They don't have Devontae Sharkley. They don't have Miles McCain. They don't have those guys that even wearing 52. They don't have Giovanni Diggs. Those guys were very impactful guys to the success of TCU. But I'm going to be honest, I really don't see too much of a fall off. Well, there's a difference. I don't think they're as talented, but they are still talented, if I could say the least. I do think they'll place pretty well in the Big 12. Now, do I know if they'll be in a Big 12 conference championship game? I'm not going to say all that, But I like what I saw out of Hendricks in his play. He obviously can use his legs as well. He extended a lot of plays with the ball in his hands against OU. Didn't throw any touchdown passes. You can see here from the stats, he was 23 of 31, 273 yards. But he did run one in for a touchdown, and he was ripping off some pretty solid ones. Had 33 yards on the ground off 7 carries. And like I said, got in for one. You saw Davis making some big time catches within the game. He had 8 for 86. And then when we get a look at the offense and the OU side of things, it was some struggles mainly for Avery Rhodes. Avery Rhodes, he just, I don't know, man. It just seems like he's just not that guy. This for a second year in a row. We saw Allen Mourning 2 years back, his freshman year with OU. I mean, this guy was looking like a top tier prospect, right? And then he just fell off with terrible performances last year in CS4. And it looks like the bad quarterback play kind of is like the same. I wouldn't say he's fell off as bad as we saw Mourning, because of course this is Rhodes' freshman year, and we've seen some good games out of Rhodes here, here and there, and some good throws and things like that. But it just doesn't seem like they have that guy like Mourning was, or like Daryl Johnson back in his heyday back in CS2. So, the quarterback play just really isn't there. Jalen Cooper still has yet to get that 100-yard game. There's a lot of talk about that kid coming into this season from how he was looking in the scrimmage games, and just has not lived up to that hype now for 5 weeks. But I will say, he did have a much better performance. He had some pretty solid runs, but still under 4-yard per carry average, so that's not that great. Eddie Champ continues to make some big plays and catches. He got in the end zone for a touchdown. I actually said this wrong. I was talking about Avery Rhodes throwing 2 interceptions, but if you watch that game, he actually threw in 2 touchdowns. Avery Rhodes' play, though, he just don't seem to have that level of finishing out the game, putting points on the board. And there's been quite a few teams that have struggled with this, right? Would like to see quarterbacks really take charge. I really feel like this year we have not seen that, right? Some quarterbacks, are putting together a string of some games, but consistency is a big issue I'm starting to see here within this year's college series, more so with quarterbacks, like I said. But at the same time, just nobody really has established themselves as, hey, yo, I'm the top guy here. There's a few guys who may be in that category. Of course, I'm not going to go into details of who those are, because, of course, I got to do the ratings and everything when it comes to the draft. But I really do feel like a message I can put out there is that this college series is still wide open. We know what positions look like. They're going to have a lot of depth and a lot of players that's going to be pretty deep for the RFL draft. But no player really has just really separated themselves and said, I'm the best at this position just yet. It just has not been there yet. But TCU has found a way to get the victory here. They got it done 17-14. It was a great game. I love the game. The back and forth was solid. I thought it was a solid defensive performance too, of course, to have both teams neither scored 20 or more points, but it was very competitive. Enjoyed how the game went. And TCU getting the victory. I gotta go check again to see what their record is here. They're now 2-2 in the season, because they too had a bye week. And then as for Oklahoma, they fall under 500 at 2-3. So things not looking too great for Oklahoma right now, taking that loss and already got the 3 losses. But of course, both of these teams, I still feel like they could still easily get themselves into the bowl game category. Of course, also I forgot to mention here, it's just going to be me solo dolo, and next week I'll be solo dolo on the podcast, because for Pecan, he got a new job and everything, and he actually is studying and working on some more things. So I was like, hey man, he sent me a message. I was like, hey, you gotta take 2 weeks. You gotta take 2 weeks, And so we'll probably have him on, after episode what would it be, the 6, 7. We'll have him on for season episode 8, excuse me. But big win there for TCU, getting that 500. They came into this 1-2, so that's a great booster there for momentum throughout the season. And then we get into the premier games. So 3 premier games we had at 1 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Gotta play the bell for Clemson, man, because Clemson, they had this game, right? They should have walked away with the victory. Texas A&M, I feel like they are a team that can catch you here and then. They've done that for the past couple of seasons, But this Clemson team continues to be what it's been for the past 2 to 3 years in the college series. And it's just these guys just can't seem to capitalize and win games that they're supposed to win. And they're just not performing on a level that I think that they, with the talent that they have, they got a base 91 overall roster. And it's just not showing for whatever reason. The past couple of years, they've had that roster for 2 to 3 years now. And for Texas A&M to come here, I'm not saying Texas A&M in real life, not a bad team, but in the college series, I think they're like an 82 overall as a team. They're not that good. And, at times they can have their moments, and they had their moment to be able to pull back, get this win 25-22. So, that was extremely tough. And as for Clemson right now, when we get a look at the ACC, they're under 500 as well. They're 2-3 on the year. And then we look at Texas A&M. Texas A&M now 2-3. So that's just a L that Clemson definitely shouldn't have taken. This is the same team that beat Ohio State earlier this season. Of course, like I said, we were going to talk more about Ohio State, but I still feel like that's a solid team. And as for Clemson, they just don't seem to have that consistency of play. They got to get it together. And of course, we got to give the big bell to Maryland, man. We were talking on the last podcast, right? We were just saying, what team do we feel is going to have the last loss, right? I'm on a podcast. I feel like it's going to be Iowa. Iowa's looked pretty trash up to this point. And it's crazy that they get their first win of the season against my favorite college team in Maryland and beat them by 3 points. This game in Maryland should have had. I don't know how they dropped the ball on this one, but they did. And 23-20 is the final score. Got to give another bell for the Terps. This is a game you got to win. This game you definitely got to win. Looking at the Big Ten, Maryland, they're still over 500 though. They're 3-2. They had such a great start to this season, right? 3-0, but now they've lost 2 in a row. And I really felt like this would have been the game to really catapult them to get a chance to play in a bowl game, which is something they didn't do last year because they finished the year 4-8. So they're just one win away from being what they were last year. But this should have been their 4th win of the season right here. And so now it's really gotten to the point where when we were talking about Maryland earlier in the season, you get a look at who they beat, right? The last game that they did win when they went 3-0, they beat Texas. And at the time, it was like, hey, Texas is looking a little shaky too, but Texas is a good team. At least we thought they were. Then Texas drops the ball. They're losing games. They lost to Oklahoma State in a close one, 13-10. So now that victory doesn't look as good. Michigan blows Maryland completely out the water, 31-3. And so we're just like, oh, well, that's Michigan. This is a game they should win. Now it looks like they're exactly what we kind of thought they were, right? Because this loss to Iowa really says a lot. Not only that, this is a loss in the conference of the Big Ten for them. So first win here for Iowa. Let's get hashtag Tyler in the chat, man, because he's a big fan of Iowa. Win, lose, or draw, man. He's always showing up for those Iowa games. Hey, you boys got a dub, man. I wish I had a round of applause button. I keep saying I'm going to install that, but I don't. At some point, I will put that on, but tough loss for the Terps, man. Can't lose those games. Then Arizona State, we were talking about between 2 teams who we thought were going to win or who's going to lose every game this season, right? Iowa's not going to be one of them now since their win over Maryland. And Florida State still in search of their first win. They fall to 0-5. And it just looks like this Florida State curse in the college series continues to be what it is. They just can't seem to win games. Arizona State's able to beat them. I did have Arizona State favored to win this game, though, and they did just that. It was a good fight. It definitely was a good fight, good game. Shout out to Armani Falana getting his first 100-yard game. So I'm going to give a shout out to him on that. He had some big catches, got in the end zone for a touchdown. 27-20 the final score there. So Arizona State. You go check what their record is because I have this on tap as well. Arizona State 2-3, still under 500, but hey, getting the win, keeping the streak, the losing streak that is, going for Florida State, and they're looking to try to turn things around. Florida State just, I don't know, just can't seem to get it together. So that was the 1 p.m. slots in terms of the results. Let's go ahead and get a look at the 4 p.m. slots on Saturday. And we had Baylor versus North Carolina. I have to give a shout out to Baylor and the way their defense was able to play for the most part. They had some big plays, but at the end, it was a great game. Baylor finds a way to win, and they're 4-1 now in the Big 12, leading the Big 12. So, I mean, we talk about this team, right, and how they just don't seem to have that consistency factor, which is going to hurt them in the long run when it comes to trying to compete in the playoffs. They have only one loss, so they have a chance, but they can't have these up and down performances, right? Can't have those up and down performances against top tier opponents. And we've seen some of the top tier opponents already that's at the top of the RFL College Series. They have those games at times too, but it's just not as bad as their fall offs are at times, right? You got teams where they could have blown them out by 30 and they end up only winning the game by 3 points. But they find a way to win over UNC by 7, 31-24, the final score. I thought they played a pretty solid game in this one. I think they played a really solid game. UNC is continuing to, I just think it's just a different year for these guys, man. We knew it was going to be like that. Not as many commits to go there. And then we get a look at where they stand. They're 2-3 in the ACC. So it's not really over for these guys either. They're competing, but they're just not winning the games, right? And we'll have to see if they kind of flip that around. Do I see them going back to the ACC championship, let alone winning it like they did last year? I highly doubt that. Highly doubt that right now, especially now that they're caught up with Notre Dame, who has the same record. But moving on to the final game, LSU, close game against Texas, man. Close game against Texas. This is why you don't know what you're going to get in the college series, right? Especially this year. You can win a game, next week you lose a game. And you got to bring your A game every week. This is a team that's number 1 in the country. Got to keep it, but boy, was it close. Almost fumbled the bag against Texas. Very defensive game, but they found a way to get the win, and that's what good teams do, right? Good teams find a way, regardless how difficult it gets or how much you're down by, find a way to exit that game with a win, and they did just that. 17-14, the final score. Was a good defensive game. LSU getting it done. It's going to breeze pretty much by these premier games here. This is only one take. Then we get a look at Louisville versus Notre Dame. For the most part throughout this game, I mean, it was back and forth. Notre Dame was mainly, taking those leads, and it was a lot of tie-ups where you had Louisville coming out and tying it up as well. But the big factor of this game was Tyler Buckner, his ability to stretch plays with his legs, throwing the ball on the move, and just making big plays through the air for his team. You saw good running by Isaiah Neal, as you can see here, 19 carries for 99 yards, just 1 yard off that, and Butler in the end zone for 101 yards and a touchdown, 8 receptions. We continue to see Sidney Jenkins, his generic wide receiver, who led the team with 120 yards and a touchdown for Louisville. Continue to see him, regardless of what the competition is, make big plays and put up stats, put up yards. So that is somebody, I think guys might want to keep eyes on, because that's kind of what you want to see. You want to see, like, you may be a part of a small school or whatever have you, but if you or that player continues to put up big stats against good opponents, it shows the ability of that player and what he's able to do and his talent level. And I think Sidney Jenkins is really starting to show, like, hey, he might actually be a pretty solid receiver. We talked about Auburn, even though they got blown up, didn't put up no yards against Georgia, though, like that. TJ Holcomb, though, he's one of those guys outside of Georgia. He's been putting up some good stats. And I'm talking about overly good stats, even against weak opponents, to get the 223 yards he had the week before. I mean, and he just came off 150 plus also. So it's guys like that you got to look out for. Louisville had 2 100-yard receivers in this game, as they also had submitted wide receiver Reno Hightower have a 100-yard game. He had made some really big plays and catches. There was nothing going here on the ground, though, for Steve Washington. Notre Dame just completely shut that down, and it was a rough day again for Malik Cunningham. Passed for over 300 yards, but 2 interceptions, and continues to struggle at his position here in the college series. But Notre Dame victorious. They're 2-3, making predictions from last podcast and the podcast before that, we really do feel Notre Dame might be able to really flip the script, because every other team that they played outside of those first three, which were top-notch opponents that they stayed in the game with and could almost even beat. I mean, this Notre Dame team could easily be 5-0 right now, right? So if we're talking about that's how talented this team is, even though they're sitting at 2-3, they fell short against top tier talent, and everybody else so far up to that point, they've blown out. And they haven't actually blown out Louisville here within this game, but they got the job done, winning by 2 scores. That's very solid for me, and it's a good win. As for Louisville, they 2 in the ACC, 2-3 record, so pretty interesting. Yeah, pretty interesting. Notre Dame able to get that done, and Louisville, I think they got a shot. They got a potential shot to make it to the playoffs as well. Well, not the playoffs, make it to a bowl game as well. 4 wins. We'll have to see. We'll have to see for both teams. Then we go back into the premier games, and looking at the premier games, Oklahoma State. Look, UCLA and Oklahoma State, I had a feeling this was going to be a great game, and that it was. Spencer was killing it, man. Absolutely killed it on running the football. Had over 100 yards easy on that. 3 passing touchdowns. UCLA was putting up a good fight. We had a kick return for a touchdown in this one. So we actually had 2 this year. Blanking on where the other one came from, but I know for a fact that the UCLA-Oklahoma State game, that game was a kick return for a touchdown. And the first one, it just ran straight up the middle, broke the tackle, and then was out of there. So UCLA falling short to Oklahoma State, 24-20. When we get a look at UCLA in the Pac-12, these guys over 500 right now. They are 3-2. And as for Oklahoma State in the Big 12, they are at the same record. So these are 2 teams who are kind of shocking us this year with performances and being able to get wins. You know, that's something that they just haven't been able to do the last couple of years, or really at all in the college series. But Oak State getting it done. Great game as expected. And that was it. And got to play the bell, though, here for this upcoming game, which was atrocious, as first win of the season for Wisconsin was pure domination over Washington. Washington has fell off pretty bad this year. Wisconsin, I mean, at one point, they were up there. I think it was 31-10 or 41-10. It was getting extremely bad. I think it was 41-10, man, where these guys were just dominating. Corbett continuing to kill. He had over 100 yards easy, touchdowns. And Washington just not being able to get it. They turned it on late towards the end of the game, where they were able to put up those plethora of points, but they got down by so much. There was just no shot to be able to get themselves right back in this game. So Wisconsin, man, shout out to them. They get their first win of the season, and a lot of teams that we were talking about potentially going winless, they got their wins this week. So that's pretty interesting. It might end up following the pattern where there's not another season where not a single team goes winless. Because at the very least, I think every team has at least won 2 games in every season in the RFL. So we'll see if that's going to happen. Let me know if there's any team that you think, guys, in the chat, that is going to win less than 2 games, or if you still think the teams who haven't won yet are not going to win a single game. Florida State being one of them, and let me see the other, West Virginia. So Florida State and West Virginia, do you think those 2 teams are going to still be winless? Do you think every team's going to win? And if they do get the wins, what team do you think is going to be the first to only win 1 game in a season? Yeah, so big win right there for Wisconsin. Wisconsin improves to 1-4 in the season, so that's not really too much. And Washington falls the same record at 1-4, so that's just tough. UCLA, USC got the win, but again, just showing not dominating though, right? They're not the same USC team that they were before with Calvin Poole, CS3 and CS4. West Virginia is a much less of a good team than they were a year ago, and the year before that didn't get any recruits like that. Only a couple guys, Alcott, the quarterback, and in the backfield. Got a running back, but they've been putting up a fight. I will give it to West Virginia. They are putting up a fight. The last 3 games, they've made it pretty close, and they could have almost got USC in this one, but USC does find a way to get it done, 28-26. It was a great catch by Ajon Grant in this game. Unfortunately, don't have the photos for that. We're trying to work on that. Tyon had to record this game, but saw Ajon Grant, of course, posted up on social media, on Instagram, that catch he had in the back left corner of the end zone on 2 guys. That was probably one of the top catches of the week. I'd probably say I'll put it up there. It's catch of the week. I know this was one-hand catch that we had during the live game, which was crazy. But those 2 about even for me. And then we move into the 4 p.m. Eastern game where we only had one. And Florida, boy, this is the Florida we've been seeing the first couple of weeks. Because first 2 weeks, Florida looked like, hey, this Florida team looked like it's going to be something this year. Then they lost their last 2 games. The week 3 against Tennessee, they lost a close one after an interception. And then the week 4, they just got absolutely dominated. Couldn't really, look anything like they did. But this is how you bounce back against a team that just came off a victory against Alabama, which was one of the top teams in the SEC at the time. And Florida beats them by 24 points. AR was top-notch AR in this game, man. Easy over 100 yards, putting on moves, getting out of there, passing, just destroying them, doing it all. And they get the win here as they improve to 3-1 on the season. As for South Carolina is 2-3 on the season. But once again, always a team to look out for, because you never know. You never know with South Carolina. They've always been a team to drop a team that we aren't expecting them to drop. And Alabama was one of those guys. Florida was not going to be one of them. Florida absolutely killed it. Great job by AR and the Gators. And then we get a look at Oregon here against Stanford. Now, I knew Oregon, based off of just the morale and the team level, the talent level coming into this game, that they were going to win. But this is 2 back-to-back dominant 48-point victories by Oregon. So very impressed with Oregon right now on their consistency, right? To put up points. Ronnie Shanahan is turning back into Ronnie football. He's playing some great football right now, and just absolutely destroyed Stanford in this one. 48-10. You can see Shanahan, 3 touchdown passes, and throw a single interception. Was using his legs. Had some great passes on the move, man. I think that's one of his best assets when it comes to him being a quarterback, is his throwing on the move. He's able to place those passes and much better locations for his receiver to catch, and extending plays as well than he is just sitting still in the pocket. I think usually when he's in the pocket, he has a lot of issues, and for a smaller guy, it makes sense, right? I mean, you got those tall offensive linemen, you got to find little angles to throw in, and it looks like every time he's finding angles and he's throwing that ball out, he's making plays, and he did exactly that this week. Big time play by him. But of course, can't shout out Ronnie Shanahan without shouting out his running back, who was able to really get this offense going as well. Chris Clark is a monster, man. He almost put up his second 200-yard game of the season. Had 220 plus. Last time when he did do it, it only fell 8 yards short in this game, and boy, they feed him. 31 carries. He had 192 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Dude was an absolute monster. And Sebastian Black, wide receiver, he had 80 yards on 6 receptions and was in the end zone for a couple of touchdowns, make some big catches as well for Oregon. McKee just absolutely got tore up, was getting sacked, and 3 interceptions within this game. They couldn't run the football, as you can see there from the stats, and Oregon just dominated. That's the Oregon you want to see. I think they're starting to play like we expected them to in the beginning of the season, with the weapons that they were able to acquire, especially on offense with Ronnie. And then we move into the final game of the week. This was game of the week. It was a great game, but Penn State was able to separate, and we got to play the bell, because this raises the question now here, guys. This definitely raises a question from what it is titled on the podcast, right? Do you guys think we're going to have a new champion? I mean, it's always hard to be able to repeat, period, get back to the playoffs, all that. But for Ohio State, they've been good front runners, but already 2 losses up to this point in 4 games. 2 losses in 4 games. They're obviously not looking the same as they were the last couple of years when they won those back-to-back national championships. And man, it was a rough going for Dylan Lewis. It looks like when Dylan Lewis isn't clicking, that's when they're losing games. He threw 5 interceptions in their last loss, 3 in this one. And man, Penn State, they put it on them 30-16, beat them by 2 scores, 14 points. It definitely looks like Ohio State, they just aren't the same team. They might not make it to the playoffs, man. I mean, 2 losses, that's usually your max. They lose any more than this, well, I think they lose another game, they're done. They got a chance, of course, to potentially win, but I don't know. Let me see what you guys think in the chat. It says Oregon is on a roll, scoring 96 points in the last. So yeah, that's crazy. So what team more? Just chopping up. And I see Richie Dubs going in on Dylan. The same guy went over before. But yeah, I really do get the vibes. See some guys saying new champions. I really do think that. I honestly, my take, I don't think that Ohio State makes it back to the playoffs. I really don't, like, especially with the situation with them changing their defense to 3-4. Even before then, they really weren't getting that pressure or being that dominant of a defense as they were before. And to make it more out of their personnel, I think it's going to really give them problems moving forward this season. I do see them potentially dropping another game, honestly. And not to say that they can't go undefeated up to this point. They can do that. They still have good talent. But, I mean, Penn State. What about Penn State? And Sean Clifford, 3 touchdown passes, had 1 interception this game. 4 was running great. Saunders was making some crazy catches. He was the one who had that one-hand catch in double coverage. Sean Clifford just threw that in there. It was a great catch, and he was able to score the next play. Penn State. What do you guys think about Penn State? Is Penn State a playoff team? I really feel like they might just be. And they got a tough little schedule, though, I will say. It's not going to be easy for them to win, but honestly, they should be undefeated at this point. I know LSU is undefeated right now. They're the number 1 team in the country. But when you look at LSU, that game, Penn State lost that game for themselves. They had LSU. Fumbled the ball, and when they should have just ran it and just kicked the field goal and won. And so when you look at it that way, I mean, Penn State has been a consistently good team, despite even in the loss against LSU. They're playing good teams, and they're winning. And by good margins here, as you could see, 14 points over Ohio State is definitely a big feat for this team. So shout out to the Nittany Lions, even though they have no prospects on this team that are submitted from the community. But Penn State's looking like a squad, man. This is a squad that you're definitely going to have to look out for. But that is it for the recaps here, guys. Like I said, it's going to be a much shorter podcast since it's just going to be me going in and out of these games and getting straight to the point. Now, let's go ahead and get a look at the Week 6 Top 25 rankings. I want to see in the chat before I do show them, what do you think the top 5 will be in the top 25 rankings for this week? I'm reading the chat here. Penn State, Miami, Natty. That'd be interesting. Once Penn State gets past the next 2 games, they have smooth sailing. Yeah, they got some tough games. Pat says LSU, Miami, Penn State, Baylor, Oregon. Okay. Anybody else got some suggestions out there? Rashad Mitchell says LSU, Miami, Michigan, Penn State, and Tennessee. Lito, LSU, Miami, Penn State, Baylor, Ducks for Oregon. They got to play us in another week. Yeah, so they got some stuff going on. Seth Brewer says, I think Penn State will easily win the Big Ten this season. That's a good possibility. When I look at the Big Ten here, let me see, I got them on the site here. Yeah, Penn State's leading right now. Only team since they've already taken out Ohio State that's really in their path is Michigan, and they play this week. So you already know what the game of the week's going to be. That's going to be live. Michigan's looking good. I think that might be the Big Ten Conference Championship game, man. Michigan and Penn State. And then I'll get a look at one more. Seth says Penn State, Miami, Oregon, LSU. That would be his top 4 I guess exiting the records, not including the records. But here we go. Top 25 rankings for week 6. So LSU obviously going to stay at number 1. They're undefeated. Of course, for anybody who doesn't know, in the RFL college series, since we only have 32 teams, it goes by record first, then everything else. But number 1, LSU. Number 2, Miami. Nothing changing there. Penn State going up to number 3. Oregon moves up to number 4. They are able to jump Baylor. Baylor goes to number 5. Michigan at 6. Georgia 7. Tennessee 8. Alabama 9. Florida 10. Maryland 11. Oklahoma State 12. UCLA 13. It's crazy seeing those two teams moving up there. USC 14. Ohio State dropping down to 15. TCU 16. Oklahoma 17, Notre Dame 18, North Carolina 19, Clemson 20, Louisville 21, South Carolina 22, Auburn 23, Texas A&M 24, and Stanford hanging on by the hairs of their chinny chin chin at 25. So those are your top 25 rankings going into week 6. Let me see what some of the reactions here in the chat. So I got to be honest. We got dominant. Yeah. Seth keeping it real out there. So you were mostly right. Yeah, you got it right. You would have had it right, Pat, if it wasn't for Oregon jumping Baylor. But when I look back at it, I had to move Oregon up because they were pretty even. But when we look at the strength of schedule and who they played and who got the more meaningful wins at that point, that's where it's just like, okay, they were even. Now I have to choose which team based off of what I'm seeing is better. 2 back-to-back 48-point victories, and one of those being over USC, which I feel like Baylor at this point, with their opponents, they haven't played or had more meaningful wins than them, and they have shown more consistency than Baylor, in my opinion, to be able to put a game away when they do win. So I had to give it to the Ducks right now to be able to get the jump, but Baylor's right there neck and neck. Maybe later on down, of course, they got more Big 12 games to play, right? They got to play TCU, got to play Oklahoma, depending on how well they're doing there and how Oregon's doing. Oregon's got some heat coming up. Baylor can jump them back. So it's all about how you win games, right? Record first, how you win games is very important. So it's going to be pretty interesting, man. I also want to ask you guys, who do you guys think will finish, if you had to guess right now, who would be your top 4 teams who make it into the college series playoffs? I agree with you. Yeah, man. As long as Bama keeps being trash, we could. CP loving to see Bama at 9. Oregon's offense is going to be a problem if they make it to. Yeah, they're definitely explosive. It's that same group right now. So you guys think Oregon, Penn State, Miami, LSU going to playoffs? You got LSU, Miami, Penn State, Baylor. LSU, Miami, Penn State, Tennessee throwing his team in there. Yeah, a lot of I do feel like these top heavy teams, there are some teams that still, in my opinion, can compete, right? Because not too many of these teams are too far off. I mean, Georgia, we were just talking about, they were at one point were the number 1 team in the country after they got their win. Of course, quickly lost it and just came off a bye week. But they're in the SEC. They got some tough opponents coming. They only lost to the number 1 team in the country right now. And the way they looked against Auburn, they could potentially be able to power their way up there. Michigan, how they've been looking has been great. But I feel like the Michigan-Penn State game, both teams already have 1 loss on the season. Whoever loses that game pretty much is just about push that other team out of the playoff talks with 2 losses, but not necessarily. So we're going to have to see. Tennessee's still in the mix of things. Bama, despite the loss, I would still say is in the mix of things if they can get the quarterback play together. But I feel like from 9 up, they've got a true shot of making it to the playoffs. I like how Florida's looking. They're very good compared to what they were a season ago. But I don't feel like they're going to make that jump at all. They already had their 2 losses. Pretty much everyone with 2 losses right now is just about out. I don't see them making that change or being better than the teams that's in the top 9 right now. And that includes Ohio State now all the way down to 15, which is tough for them. But for the college series, hey, I'm pretty sure most people enjoying it because we want to see a new champion, right? Two times back-to-back national champions. They did their thing, that's for sure. This year, things looking much different. But with that being said, we're going to now just move into the final segment, and then we can open up for quick questions. And we're going to get out of here pretty fast. Let's go ahead and get a look at the Week 6 schedule. Still have our, I think it's 11 games. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. We got our 12 games. 14 games. Okay, so yes. So we got 14 games this week. I'll go ahead and pull up what I got for the spreads. And so first game that we have this week in week 6, Alabama versus Texas A&M. I've got Alabama winning by 5 or more points. I definitely feel like this should be a bounce back game for Bama that they should be able to get done pretty easily here. Let me actually minimize this and since I don't have a co-host also here with me, what I can do is I can ask you guys what you guys think. Who are you picking in these games? Alabama, Texas A&M. Put who you got and if they cover the spread. And the spread is Bama by 6. Does Alabama win by 6 or more points this week? That game will be tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern. He's going with Texas A&M. Bama cover, says Mr. Calling Home. What's going on, Clyde? 13 months as an RFL YouTube member. Appreciate that, my guy. I think the current top 4 are the best teams in the CS5. Yeah, they definitely in that conversation. Most people agreeing there. What's going on, Waddles? Okay, so I've seen just a few guys there on that one. Bama on the under. Okay, don't think that Bama will beat Texas A&M by 6 or more points. All right, yeah, so I'm going with Alabama. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. They are the favorites to win that game. They should win that game. 6 or more points is my go-to. Okay, game number 2, Friday. We have at 8 p.m. Eastern, Maryland versus Tennessee. Already talked about Maryland, right? Started out 3-0. Kind of got hyped up a little bit. Okay, they beat Texas. We already went through the whole spiel. But lately, these 2 losses that they've taken, pretty bad. Pretty bad. Tennessee, even though they've taken their loss, they lost one to TCU. They are still a talented team, and they've been winning in good fashion. So I definitely am going to take the Volunteers here, and I got the spread by more than a touchdown. Do you think that Tennessee wins by more than a touchdown? Let's see what you guys say in the chat. What's going on, Q? So you got a new profile picture. Got the Q-Pac back to his player, man. Tennessee cover, says Mr. Calling Home. So I got to put us. I got us putting 38, and that being the spread, or at least scoring 38 points. And I'm a little bit delayed, so I guess what I could do is I could, just so we don't waste too much time, I could go ahead and ask those questions and just look back and see what you guys are saying. But Tennessee's got the spread by a touchdown, by more than a touchdown. Okay, and then we get into the premier game starting at 1 p.m. Florida State in Wisconsin. I don't see Florida State getting their win here against Wisconsin. We saw Wisconsin be able to get a win over Washington, which honestly isn't a great team so far this year. But I do feel like Washington, if they play Florida State, should and would be able to beat them. So I do feel like Wisconsin's got more talent than Washington does, and I do feel like they got more talent than Florida State. So they should be able to beat them. I got the spread of Wisconsin winning by 4 or more points. Then game number 2 at 1 p.m. Got Arizona State versus UCLA, and caught a little bit of flack on this in the college in the Discord from Arizona State wide receiver and Armani Falana. He says, "Hey man, the spread. I actually wouldn't favor UCLA. I like how UCLA has been looking. I do feel like they will walk out of here with the victory at home over Arizona State. And I actually picked them in a close game by 2 or more points. So that's pretty much. Do you think Arizona State wins or UCLA wins? It's tough though, because if you look at both of the teams, I do feel like they can be evenly matched, but I do like a lot more of what I'm seeing from UCLA than I do opposed to Arizona State. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the Bruins in this one with the home field advantage. That's one of my outlier picks that I've had so far. And then for the final 1 p.m. Saturday game, Oklahoma State versus Louisville. I'm taking Louisville. I think Louisville is a little bit more talented team, and I got them winning by a field goal or more. I think we got some really good matchups here so far in the 1 p.m. slot. All these teams are pretty close, so we should have some competitive games. But yeah, Louisville, they gotta be wary now though, because Oklahoma State, they are tough. They are definitely tough. Their defense does good, and you got to watch out for Spencer Sanders, man. That dude's crazy right now this year. The scrambling ability, passing, all that is looking crazy at the moment. And then for the 4 p.m. Eastern games, we got Washington versus USC, and I have USC bouncing back, getting the victory by 5 or more points. Actually, not bouncing back. They won last week against West Virginia, as we covered, but I got them getting another win and beating Washington by 5 or more points. I think both teams definitely are having it rough right now. More so Washington, though, than USC. USC should be able to win that game. Then we got the Red River rivalry. This should be a great game, right? Texas versus Oklahoma. It's always a great game in real life and in the college series. It really has been. I got Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma beats Texas. Texas is definitely shown to be a very inconsistent team up and down. I'm going with the Sooners. I think they're a little bit more consistent and should be able to put up a game. Tough loss they had just this past week against TCU, but this is the game where I think they bounce back. Got them once again by 4 or more points. Then we cap off the day with me being in the booth, 8 p.m. Eastern, Florida versus TCU. Definitely a good matchup. Good matchup here for sure. I like how Florida's been looking, but I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs. I think it's going to be a very close and competitive game. Could actually go either way, to be honest, but I like how TCU has been playing, like I said, and I think that they can get it done there at home by a field goal or more. Then we get a look at Clemson and Alabama. No, I said Alabama. It's Clemson and Auburn. Crazy how this used to be quite the rivalry, right? Earlier in the college series, I remember Christian. He had a player on Auburn, and Clemson ended up getting in over Auburn. Auburn beat them, things like that. And it's kind of every time these guys meet, it's been a pretty good game. So I'm going to go with Clemson though here, because all this Auburn team isn't as talented as that Auburn team was back then. Got a great wide receiver in TJ Holcomb, I would say, to look out for in every week's game, right? But I don't know. I don't know if we could trust them here in this game. So I'm going to go with Clemson to win by 4 more points. Then, following that game at 1 p.m. Eastern, well, same time as that game, we have West Virginia versus Georgia. West Virginia, in my opinion, definitely not getting their first win against Georgia. At least they shouldn't. UGA, biggest spread of the week, got them winning by more than 10 points. So 11 or more points, I got Georgia beating the West Virginia Mountaineers. So, yeah, definitely a spread that's pretty high, but definitely believe that Georgia can cover that with the talent they've got and the way they've been playing. Of course, outside of that LSU loss, which I think really happened mainly because of the turnover issues for the team. And then for the final 1 p.m. game that day, Ohio State versus Iowa. All I'm going to say is this. I seen somebody in the chat talking about Iowa putting a bet on Ohio State, and they're just like, yo, if Ohio State loses this game, I think it was Samaj Sims, I swear if they lose this game to Iowa, I'm going to lose it. Probably not even going to bet no more. I definitely don't think that's going to happen. But, man, OSU, don't lose this game. Do not lose this game. Ohio State, I got them by 8 or more points. I think they beat them by more than a touchdown. Iowa, they got their first win of the season. They only beat Maryland, though, who, like I said, started out good, but they're showing us their true colors. They were never that good to begin with. And I think Ohio State gets their bounce back game here, and I think they beat Iowa pretty good. Then we get into the 4 p.m. Eastern game, which is only one, and that is North Carolina versus Notre Dame, which would be a really solid game. But we've been talking about how good this Notre Dame team is, and North Carolina is just not the same team. So if we're comparing seasons like from before, Notre Dame the last couple of years has not been that good. North Carolina has been pretty good, just outside the playoffs kind of talk. And now it's completely flipped where they're more on the lower end. Notre Dame, despite the under 500 record of 2-3, they are a very good team that I think definitely can wipe out the Tar Heels, especially with the home field advantage. I got them by 6 or more points. But North Carolina can put up a fight now if they take care of the football. That's the biggest thing. They take care of the football, they got a shot because they got a pretty good operating offense. That I think that can get them points and keep them in games, but got to take care of the football. That's what loses them games. And then we get into the last two main event commentated games for week 6 that you do not want to miss. Oregon versus Miami. This is the first big challenge, in my opinion, for Miami this year. This is a game that's going to show a little bit of what they can do against top-tier competition. They've been looking great. Dorian Chavis has been looking great. He hasn't thrown an interception yet still at this point in the season. Oregon just came off of 2 back-to-back 48-point games where they dominated USC and Stanford 2-0 in the Pac-12, and they're going up against one of the 2 undefeated teams, 4-0 Miami. This is definitely going to be a great game that you do not want to miss. I already see the palm trees in the chat. Great games to end off end off week 6, right? Now, I got Miami by 4 or more points. I think they do get it done. Oregon has to show consistency for me to have faith in them to win this game, because if they show up anything like they did the previous weeks before these last 2 weeks, they're not going to beat Miami, and we'll have to see. But they show up like they had the last couple of weeks, they got a chance. But I think that Miami, they got their quarterback now, probably their best quarterback up to this point in Miami college series history, and I really do feel like Miami's going to walk out of this victorious there at Hard Rock Stadium. And then for the game of the week, you do not want to miss this matchup. Penn State hosting Michigan. This is pretty much, in my opinion, once again, battle of who is the best in the Big Ten. And these games that's going to close us out, just absolute fire. This is definitely the best game to go ahead and tune into this week. Number 3, Penn State. Number 6, Michigan. I'm taking Penn State by 3. A field goal or more, and those are my predictions this week. When it comes to that game, I mean, both teams, either team could win, but I just feel like Penn State has it a little bit more this year. Michigan is very tough as well. They only lost to Alabama, which we know Alabama did just lose, had their first loss to South Carolina, but Alabama, this is why I think Alabama really is a good team, because to beat Michigan says a lot based off how they've played so far this year. So this is going to be a great game, but I got the Nittany Lions. And with that being said, that is all I'm going to be covering right now on this podcast, guys. I will be posting this on social media and things of that nature. Been working on an offensive and defensive player of the week graphic as well from Dorian Chavis. Send me what he's got. I already got most of the pictures for the guys to include on that. That'll be getting posted up on social media, so stay on the lookout for that. And with that being said, not really too much open questions. Once again, I can go ahead and answer anything you guys want to ask me in the chat. Let's go ahead. Let me scroll up and see what guys were saying during that. Palm trees, love palm trees. And then we had Miami still going to win for Christian. Cross, we go against them next week. Okay, yeah, the last 2 games of the week are definitely fire. And Ronnie Goins says, Penn State, please win. So, yeah. Let me go ahead and put up the top 25 just in case anybody missed it. And I'll do 5 minutes of open questions if anybody got anything for me as well. There you go. Getting out of here in an hour. This is going to be the shortest podcast we've had so far. this way. Looks like we might be good. It's a great job. Hey, appreciate that, Christian. Kind of glad we do have can get through this pretty fast as well, because it's going to help me be able to get through these premiere games to record. I recorded at least 3 of them, so 6 more to go. I gotta get on the phone with Tyon too, try to get this photo thing situated, so that way we could get the guys from games he recorded, you guys photos, because he has taken them. He sent some to me. I've been able to get some access, but not to all. So definitely going to try to figure something out. Thanks, Pat. Enjoy the holiday weekend. I forgot it's even. Is it Labor Day? Yeah. Yeah, it seems like that might be it for the pod. Everyone's saying pretty much good job. Not really too much to talk about, I guess, right now. I mean, everything's pretty much been said about what's going on in the college series. I can't wait for the for this to finally get out on an updated model Madden 24. Still waiting for the Madden Mod community to post out what's going on with that, and you know, how close we are to that happening, because then that's when everything's going to get real for the league. A shout out to Chrome. Says my birthday's on Sunday, so let's get hashtag awesome crocodile in the chat. Okay, we got a question here from Aiden Semino. He says, will LSU remain 1 even on a bye? Yeah, they should, because the best anybody can be with a win is 5-0. So if Miami wins, even though because they had their bye, if say for instance, if you guys had the same record and Miami won, though, they could have jumped you. But since you're at 1, you got that bye, Miami's going to win. Well, no guarantees, but if they win, they'll be 5-0, but you're still the #1 team because they just caught up. Anybody else that's 4-1, if they get 5 wins, they still have a loss, which you don't. So you guys are locked still at 1, even off a bye week. So you guys could definitely get lucky there. All right, then, and that's going to be it for the podcast, man. I appreciate you guys as always. It's your boy Smitty, RFO Commissioner and play-by-play commentator, and I will be seeing you guys for the game tomorrow, which will be once again Alabama and Texas A&M in an SEC matchup. Until then, peace.